Welcome to the SNA Speakeasy. Today we have a very topical speaker and a very topical event. His name is Gregory Starr, and he was, until recently, I believe, the editor of the number one Shimbun, which is the sort of house magazine of the Foreign Correspondence Club of Japan. He's had several tenures, actually, as the head of the magazine. In my opinion, the best that we've had during my time at the club. But that's, of course, a judgment which others can make on them on their own.
Well, thank you anyway.
But first of all, why don't you kind of give a little bit of introduction to yourself? Who are you, and how did you come to be the editor of the number one Shimbun for some time?
Oh, how far do I go back? Well, I've been a magazine editor and a book editor for many, many years. Going back to like the late 70s, early 80s, when starting out with in-flight magazines, doing Air Micronesia, Japan Airlines. Then I was the editor-in-chief of a magazine called Tokyo Journal from 1990, which was a city magazine that we did everything from the arts to investigative journalism, etc. Then I was the magazine editor of Premiere, the film magazine. This was in the Japanese edition, and so it was very difficult for me for a while getting into the Japanese language editing business, but I did that for several years, working for Hachette Philippaki, the French company, and then for 7 years, I was the head of the English book publishing division or at least head of the editors at Kodansha International. That in 2011, that closed, and since then I've been a freelance writer and editor, and I was asked by John Harris, who was the publishing committee chairman, I think at the time, to become editor, and so that was, I think, from 2012, so it's been quite a while. I mean, I think there was a year in there that I resigned earlier from the same president, actually, for running into the same buzzsaw of a president, and came back in a little bit more, 2 years ago, I guess it was, and then resigned last month.
Mm.
Is that
Yeah,
enough?
yeah, that's more than enough, and that it doesn't escape my notice that you were resigned slash fired by the same president, and then rehired by the next president, and then resigned, fired by this president again. It does seem to be a little bit of a pattern.
The
Um,
cycle of life.
yeah. Okay. Well, so I want to kind of take this chronologically, sort of step by step of what happened. So kind of strictly so people understand how it developed into what it became. So I guess the first one is it was the April issue that we're talking about. And what was your process of deciding to make the April issue about the Olympics? And how did you give the assignment to the art director in regards to this issue?
Well, the April issue was not about the Olympics. Actually, the contents were the corona. We had done one story previously in the earlier issue of what it was like covering coronavirus in Japan. And then I ran across this excellent article by the Global Investigative Journalism Network on tips for journalists and how to cover the coronavirus and what kind of links there were and how you should do it. And I mean, it was kind of a very matter of fact, simple story for journalists all over the world, and it seemed like a good time to run that. The art director had done a cover that was very simple and very striking, using a mask, the very simple mask, kind of in a 3D thing, like it was on somebody's face, but on a very simple background, and that's what we were going for. We had finished laying out the magazine. The magazine was done, ready to go to press. I think it was in the final proofing stage. And on March 24th, I guess it was, that was when the Olympics was postponed. And it was like, and the art director sent me a day later, I think this was the day before we were going to press, or the day that we were going to finalize the proof, and he sent me the coronavirus Olympic logo thing and said, "What do you think about this?" And it was just like, oh, what an incredible piece of design. It was just awesome. But it did cross my mind as a magazine editor. Well, it doesn't really, we don't have anything about the Olympics in the magazine itself. And we went back and forth a little bit, and we both kind of agreed that it was topical and it was kind of commentary on its own. And it stood enough. It was like an article about the Olympics being affected by the coronavirus in one simple image, which to me was too good of an opportunity and too good of a piece of art, too provocative and too topical to pass up. And so we switched the covers at the last minute.
And thus made history.
So to speak. Yeah.
Well, it does seem to me that, and this is probably something we may get into with our patrons in the Q&A section later. But if 10 people look at that art design, that cover which merges the Olympics logo with the coronavirus image, they seem to take many different interpretations about what that means, and maybe 10 people would have 10 different interpretations. What did it mean to you when you saw it? When you look at that piece of art, what did you think it was communicating?
I think Andrew Horvath said this in an email or something. He said the Olympics has fallen victim to the coronavirus, and that's exactly what I took out of it. I mean, whether rightly or wrongly, over history now, it's going to be known as the Olympics that was at least postponed because of the coronavirus. It's that simple. And I know it can be read other ways. And of course, because of the timing, people had already started talking about, was it because of the Olympics that it had been delayed that long? I mean, was it because, had they just done that, trying to keep the Olympics? So that kind of thought was, of course, in everybody's head. But the funny thing is, and you mentioned this was the April issue. We didn't hear anything about
Yeah,
it.
I want to hold that thought. Yeah,
Okay.
but continue about the meaning. And so, what did it mean to you?
That's what I said.
Okay.
It meant to me that the virus was affecting the Olympics.
Okay.
Horribly.
So my next question then is precisely that. It was out for how long before the Olympic Committee made its first comment? About a month?
A month and a half, and it had disappeared off of the front page of it was only on the front page of the FCCJ website for the month of April. So by the time this happened, it had been off of the website, or you had to go and look for the April issue for 20 days or something. I think they wrote on the 14th or 15th or something like that. I'll have to look it up. But it had already died down.
Right. And so before the first Olympic Committee made their first comment, for that month plus, what kind of feedback had you gotten during that interval?
Not a peep. Not one. I mean, I had from friends and people that I had shared the image with because I thought it was just such an incredible piece of design. I had gotten all kinds of just amazing work and, comments like that, but not a peep of any kind of anyone taking offense, no negative emails or comments or anything.
Well, what were the positive comments?
Like I said, that was incredible. People were talking about making T-shirts about the image and stuff, and I was a little bit, because it was so positive in a way. You're always hoping that your covers will be provocative and stimulating and open some kind of discourse, and you get a little frustrated when it's just all praise or all going one way or other. I mean, if it's all negative, you feel the same way. And it wasn't until the Asahi started digging into this story, which was at the end of, that was also like the beginning of April. So it had already gone off. So somebody had gone to the Asahi, or somebody, I don't know how that happened, to tell you the truth. But they approached our art director for an interview at the beginning of May. He had talked to him about it, what it meant to him, and kind of said something. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so I'll let people who are interested, you can go back and look at the Asahi Shimbun and find those articles. And the Asahi, what caused the big brouhaha was when the Asahi called the Tokyo Olympic, the organizing committee, asking for their opinion on this cover, which they had obviously never seen. Which,
Oh,
of course, then they had to show some outrage, and they got all their pants in a bunch, as we would say. And
I see. So
you know,
interesting. So it probably began with the Asahi deciding to write an article about it. So it wasn't
yeah,
actually beginning with the Olympic Committee. All right. So uh, when did you first realize that that the tsunami was coming, that there was a problem, that something was coming down the pipeline?
the one of the club's staff, the administration staff, sent us a mail saying that the Tokyo, the organizing committee, had called and complained, but he wasn't around. He wasn't able to answer it, and he said, I think it's just a freedom of expression issue, and I told my staff to answer them that way. And whoever it was at the organizing committee called them back and said, no, we're not going to let that go. We want to write a letter. And so the admin staff said, well, then write us a letter. So then they wrote a letter in Japanese, which is pretty much similar to the final thing that people may have seen in English and Japanese. It's the ask, that they were offended by it, and that they thought it was an infringement of copyright issue, and asking us to take it down. So it happened very quickly. At first, it didn't seem like it was any big deal, and then it quickly became a big deal. And then at the same time, the admin said that he had heard that there was going to be a press conference held, or an online press conference held by the organizing committee. That's when we knew that, and that's when obviously the board and different people got involved. The president.
All right. And so clearly, okay, then you realize that there's an issue. When did you realize that this is an issue that could cost you, the post which you had been fulfilling for so long?
Well, the president's first email, about this at all in this threads that were going around was, let me see if I can even find it. It kind of really shocked me. It was, this is not about freedom of expression or about who sent the letter. It is purely a copyright infringement issue. And he made it very obvious that he believed that we were in the wrong. He said, this is wrong. You've copied everything almost exactly the way it was. He ignored the fact how much we had added to the outside of that logo. Ignored the fact that you'd changed it where people would immediately look at it as a coronavirus thing as well as the Olympic logo, and just said, I believe we would lose. This is before he had talked to any lawyers or anything. He said, I believe we would lose if a lawsuit is raised. He used the same original one, 100%, added little bumps. We don't have the right to use a copyrighted work, and I don't want to spend members' money to do this. And I thought, well, that makes it pretty clear that from now, I don't know how the discussion is going to go from here, but it's clear that the president is kind of looking for a scapegoat. At the same time, he then, in the same mail, I think it was, attacked the art director for giving the interview without the permission of the club to the Asahi Shimbun. So it was clear he was looking for people to blame, and also that it was a copyright infringement issue, ignoring the freedom of expression side of it.
Okay. Well, that last part I want to get to in the next question after this one, which is, so how did it come about that that you decided to resign or threaten to resign? What happened there?
Well, when it was clear that he thought it was a copyright infringement issue, I mean, I've been a magazine editor for a long time and a book editor, and like people under President Trump say, you serve at the, what is it? What's the phrase? You
The
serve
pleasure
at
of the
the
president, I think.
pleasure of the president. And that's what an editor does too. He serves at the pleasure of the publisher. So we did say, I said, I do think it's a freedom of expression issue, but if you think it's that, then take it down. Take it down. And the art director and I offered our resignations right there, just to accept But if that's an infringement of, if you're not even going to fight that, the freedom of expression side of it, I don't understand what the point is. We offered our resignations, and then I don't know if you want to just go right into this. The board never contacted us, or the president never contacted us asking what we thought, or why we did this, or how this was decided, or what other images were there, or how I decided to go with this as the editor of the magazine. There was no discussion at all, and you could feel that obviously the board and they were going on, and you get little tidbits of emails floating by, but never was there a concentrated effort to say, let's figure out what you're doing and say, what did you do? Why did you do it? No one asked myself or the art director. So it was obviously kind of going in the direction that we didn't want it to go. Then the night before, just stop me if I'm getting too much into the weeds.
Well, let's come back to that in a moment, and let's go back to the other question, which is, clearly, in your own mind, and I think in many other observers' mind, this was primarily an issue of freedom of expression, freedom of the press. But the president, as you say, from the outset, before consulting any lawyers, had decided that this was a copyright infringement issue. Why do you have the view that you have that this is a freedom of the press issue and a freedom of expression issue? Because this has been 100% denied by the president, with at least the silent consent of the board of directors.
Well, this jumps to his press conference the next day.
Okay.
When he apologized, and he said in many places that I didn't apologize, I expressed regret. Well, if you look in Merriam-Webster for apologize, the first thing it says is to express regret for something. I mean, that's a politician's fudging of words. That's not a journalist's use of words. To me, it was worth making a stand for, because I knew and I've known that the Japanese laws on fair use and stuff are very vague. And when you see something that I think, my opinion, this is a brilliant piece of commentary, equal to any kind of political cartoon or anything like that. Whether you think it's humorous or not, which I don't particularly think it's humorous, it's more satirical than humorous. It's still an evocative piece of art that should be at least considered as freedom of expression. I mean, that you don't have to give up your hands, and I think it's worth a challenge as an editor. I've always liked taking things. I mean, if you don't push the envelope, you never get anywhere. I've been through a 3-year ridiculous court case in another magazine case, fighting about a freedom of expression because we used satire and the person thought it was defamation of character. And I'm in the courtroom, in a Japanese courtroom, trying to get Monty Python sketches on the record and stuff like this. But at least they listened, and at least I knew that there were these vagaries in Japanese law that you can kind of push. At the same time, let me say again, Michael, they're the publishers. If they don't agree with me on the copyright infringement issue, fine, I agree with it. I mean, I have no choice but to accept their decision. But the fact that they apologized for this and said that we actually offended people, apologize for offending people, to me is not freedom of expression, or not, freedom of the press.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There was a mixed message there. If it was only a copyright issue, then there's no need to apologize for offending people, right?
Exactly, and he could have done that and just stopped it right there.
All right, so let's get back to the process a little bit. Before the president's press conference, did any member of the board reach out to you in any way, or was there, it seems like you're suggesting there was no discussion whatsoever, not only from him, but from any authority on the board?
Well, as you know, what happens at the club, that there are a million threads and emails zapping around while people were kind of caught by surprise anyway. So excuse me, I'd have to go back and look at all these links to really point it out. But no one at the board nor the president contacted us in any kind of official way to ask us anything about the cover. There were opinions and we saw these little flashes, but nothing until we received at 9 o'clock, I think it was that night, a mail from one of the secretaries at the club saying, Khaldan Azari, the president, wants you to come to a press conference. And this was sent to both the art director and I, and it said if the art director, he was originally wants the art director to show up, and if the art director can't make it, that he wants me to show up. In that mail, it didn't say anything about what the press conference was for, what kind of decision the board had made, why we were going to go there and sit next to him, not knowing what he was going to say. We both answered saying, like, well, if he wants to invite us to a press conference, why doesn't he invite us to the press conference himself and tell us what's going on? And we got no answer really from that. The next morning, I think the art director actually just said, because they had actually even put his name up as that he was going to appear at the press conference when he had never even heard about it. And the next morning at 10, I get an email, or did I? Maybe I'm confusing things a little bit. By that time, I realized, we were going to be thrown under the bus, and I just said, and I was getting emails from other people saying, like, don't resign. Not people on the board, but people, affiliated with the club and ex-presidents and everything like that. And I was like, look, I mean, I'm going to resign because I haven't been contacted. I'm sorry, this isn't the way you run any kind of operation. At 10 o'clock, I get this thing from Khaldan saying, get in a cab, come down here and defend your opinion. Still not telling me what he was going to announce. And he was going to say, we offended people, and that I was going to hear it for the first time sitting next to him. And not also accepting the fact that it takes me 2 hours to get to the club from my house. So I didn't even bother answering that mail. So the first thing I heard about the club's decision was, like everybody else, sitting there watching him say it at the press conference online.
Mm. Well, I think there's a couple of controversial points about the way that they handled it, and I want your take on it. One is why the rush? So, do you have any sense of why the president, despite many appeals, decided to immediately concede rather than drag it out a few days or weeks to sort of sound out more opinion, to find out if there were any legal arguments that the club might use, or perhaps resources that the club might use to defend itself in this case? So what's your sense of why everything was done so quickly and with sort of an immediate surrender, essentially, from the club?
Man, your guess is as good as mine. This baffles me to this day, and I don't want to guess what people's motives are. I'm just because it may be that they were going to do a legal, and according to some board members later on, I heard that they had heard through their own sources that the committee was thinking of legal action, but they hadn't even threatened that yet. So yes, I was. It was just like that night. We're having a press conference the next morning, and it was like, well, I was still kind of waiting that eventually, surely the board's going to ask us what happened. What did you do? I mean, we're the ones who caused this whole thing. I mean, and then to hear Khaldan say in the press conference that I wish they were down here standing up for themselves, and it was like, well, thanks. If we knew what we were standing up for or why or whatever, we might have done that. Anyway, but I don't want to guess why that was done. In the past, I've seen publishing companies and stuff react that way when you don't have somebody who's been through it before. Usually when people have been through it before, they're more sanguine about the whole thing and a little bit less, freaked out by the whole matter. But the reaction from the beginning of that, oh, we've committed copyright infringement, before we've even discussed it with lawyers, to me showed a little bit of a amateurish reaction. Can I say?
You can say what you like. Um,
Yeah.
freedom of speech here at the SNA. And let's look at that legal issue, which is, the one which has those who are on the board, the president, and those who are vocally defending the board's position, uh, assert that this is completely a legal issue. And so this is where their entire argument turns on that point. They say that under Japanese law, that the club was going to get into an expensive lawsuit that we can't afford and that we would almost certainly lose. This is, maybe I suppose the strongest argument that they have in their quiver. Certainly, it's the one that they're clinging to the most. Um, as you say, the president seems to have decided that that was the case before having consulted any lawyers. Um, do you have any sense of what kind of legal consultations the board did go through before making the decision? Do we know who are these lawyers, and was the uh, was the feedback from the lawyers as bleak as the president had portrayed it in his press conference?
I have no idea. I do have there are people that I know on the board that I think are very courageous people. I would expect them to do the right thing. I'm what can I say? I don't well, I just don't know. Like I don't know who the lawyers were. I don't know. I wish I had been able to talk to them. I wish I had been involved in that whole thing because I would have liked to learn. If there were people, I would have liked to expand my own knowledge of fair use and stuff in Japanese law. But we weren't involved, and I have no idea who the lawyers were. I can only think that the board, with all those people on there, that they did their jobs, I presume, and got an answer that they believed in, and they acted because they believed it.
Okay. Well, I agree. There's that is an issue which still needs to be filled out by future investigations, shall we say? Um, and So, what kind of blowback did you personally get? Obviously, you're no longer the editor of the number one shimbun, so that is through resignation, yes. Uh,
Yes.
so, so what other kinds of blowback have you gotten, or have there been any other elements of blowbacks once it became a national issue, covered by both the national and international press?
I haven't been received anything negative really too much. I've read threads, and we've been called all the names. And if you read Twitter or the Yahoo, the comments in the Yahoo thing and everything, we've been called Korean or anti-Japanese, pro-Korean, pro-Chinese. Uh, what else were some of the things? I don't know. We've been called everything, but I haven't been targeted. The art director got, because his name appeared, he got a bit more blowback, and it gets nasty. And you read all those comments, but you see all those trolls, and you see all the comments, how much they repeat the same memes over and over again. I haven't really been let it bother me too much. I will really miss not doing the magazine. That's blowback, I guess, because there's not many magazines. Even though, 2 days after this, the Olympic Committee made their complaint. The board also, in a completely different, I don't think it had anything to do with it, but decided not to stop printing the magazine and to do it only online. So that was another reason why. Maybe it was easier to resign. I don't know, but it is hard to think that I'm not going to be doing the magazine anymore, because to work with good journalists and good writers, and to have a magazine coming out every month, and to have a magazine that you believe in, and there's not many of those jobs around anymore, to be honest.
Yeah. One other thing is The FCCJ does have a Freedom of the Press Committee. I know because I was at one point the chairman of it many years ago. Uh, did you receive any contact, or did they make any statements, or were they involved in the process in any way?
Not that I know of, no.
Does that surprise you?
Yeah, I think everybody was kind of just overwhelmed by the speed of how fast everything happened. And I don't want to say everybody, because I don't even know if they knew much about it. There was a lot of people expressing support and that were not on the board and not the president and stuff. But ex people and people surrounding it and other members and stuff that had heard about it. And there was a lot of support going around before that, even before that press conference was made. And there was a lot of expressions of support and really nice messages from a lot of people afterwards as well.
Okay. And last question for me. It's been now a couple of weeks, I guess, since hit the national headlines, and you've probably had a little bit of time to start digesting it. Um, what do you see as being the meaning of this event for the club, for the Japanese nation? Where are you in your own head about what is this event, and what is its implications?
Well, back when I was, for example, when I was with Tokyo Journal in 1990 to 1995, where you're this little English language magazine and you're trying to make an impact. And it was always, we had the president of Asahi Television had to take a pay cut because of us, things we did. And when something happens like this, there is a certain, at least we made people think and react to something. I mean, even if half of it is negative. I think what made me think this was kind of all worth it was even just the Asahi newspaper, and I was really impressed with the way that they didn't treat this as just a, oh, look at, which many people did, is just, oh, look at that stupid club of foreigners, trying to, put down Japan, or be nasty to Japanese or something, but actually looked at it and said, and got a lot of commentary back and forth, and they ran a lot of follow-up stories and ended up saying that that this actually was a good opportunity to discuss these issues of fair use, of freedom of expression. And the fact that the Asahi did that, which is a much bigger voice than our own was, is a really nice feeling, to tell you the truth. I just wish that if the club had the same approach to it and said, "Oh, this is a chance where we can really," and there were certain members of the club that were saying that. I won't name them, but they were saying, "Hey, this is a great opportunity. Let's invite the Tokyo Olympic people to come over. Let's discuss it. Let's invite people that dislike it, that are offended by it. Let's turn this into a moment of learning and discussion." And that the club ignored all that in the end and just threw all this chance away just seemed to me to be a terrible, terrible waste from a personal standpoint.
Yeah, I was one of the people who made the argument that this was an opportunity for the club to show its relevance as a bastion of free speech in the country. Um, any final comments you'd like to make before we move on to the Q&A section about something I haven't asked you about, but an aspect which that you'd like to have out there?
No, any questions or something, maybe everything. If there's a time at the end, if there's something that's left over at the end, maybe if you'll give me a chance.
All right, sounds good. So
Okay.
now it is the time for Q&A. So if